thugs try to rob an elderly man, then a fighter steps in to save the day. As Mr. Henderson made his way down the dimly lighted street, his cane made a soothing tapping sound on the pavement. The night was heavy with shadows. In spite of having survived 2 wars and being responsible for the upbringing of 5 children on his own, the retired educator did not have many fears at the age of 78. Tonight, however, there was a threat lurking in the alleyways. The identities of the 3 individuals emerged from the shadows, with their faces concealed by hoodies. A weary guy with a scar across his knuckles is the tallest of the group, and he took the first step forward. "Hand over your wallet, old man," he scoffed at the elderly man. "Make it quick, and maybe you'll get home in one piece." Mr. Henderson let out a sigh. "Son, I've lived too long to be scared of boys playing gangster." The thug's sneer no longer appeared. Big words for a guy who can barely stand. It was the elderly man's coat that he grabbed for nothing. The thug was knocked to the ground by a blow to the jaw to the force of a freight train, which caused him to fall to the ground. The newcomer was a mountain of a guy with a shaved head, a fighter's posture, and eyes that blazed with calm wrath. His friends turned around to face the newcomer. As destiny would have it, Darius, the Iron Bear Kovac, a former underground fight champion, and as luck would have it, a former pupil of Mr. Henderson, snarled. "You picked the wrong night to mess with someone's grandpa." Switchblade in hand, the second thug pounced at the victim. Suddenly, Darius executed a sidestep, grabbed his wrist, and twisted his body. A cry was heard when the knife fell to the ground with a clattering sound. The last assailant hung back for a moment before swinging fiercely. In the midst of the blow, Darius grasped it, gripped his bones until they groaned, and then jerked him forward into a particularly vicious knee strike. The thud, there is no sound. The spectacles that Mr. Henderson wore were adjusted. "Still using the dirty boxing style, I see," he smiled at Darius. "You taught me to fight smart, not fair." In the midst of the would-be thieves grumbling at their feet, he assisted his former instructor in standing up. As the sirens sounded in the distance, Darius placed his arm over Mr. Henderson's shoulders and continued to do so. "I beg you, teacher, get you back to your house." At that moment, the 2 individuals, one of whom was a legend in the classroom and the other of whom was a legend in the streets, departed, leaving behind a lesson that those thugs would never forget. There are heroes who do not wear capes. Scars are worn by some. During the time when Darius the Iron Bear Kovac was assisting Mr. Henderson in getting into a taxi, the flashing lights of the police vehicles painted the roadway in streaks of red and blue. The elderly guy gave a gentle stroke on the shoulder of his former pupil. Mr. Henderson laughed and continued, "For as long as I can remember, you've always had a knack for the dramatic, but those boys won't be the last trouble you find tonight." Darius wore a frown. "What do you mean?" As soon as the instructor had the opportunity to respond, a sleek black vehicle arrived in silence, with its tinted windows concealing the people inside. A guy dressed in an expensive suit emerged from behind the door, and it was Victor Cray, the most brutal criminal boss in the city, who was standing there. "Kovac," Cray said, his tone as smooth as honey that had been poisoned. "I've been looking for you." The muscles in Darius convulsed. He was familiar with Cray. In the underground, Cray was well known to everyone. Not a single one of them wanted to have his attention. After that, Cray said, "You work for me now," as he threw a big package into the street. A bundle of cash and a photograph of Darius's younger sister, Lena, leaving her college dorm room, were both found within the package. The blood of Darius became as cold as ice. The hold that Mr. Henderson had on his cane became more firm. Run, Darius. Despite this, the Iron Bear never fled. The strength of the fight that framed the night. After stepping out of the vehicle, Cray's enforcers, who were twin brothers with tattoos from jail, and a reputation for dumping corpses and trash, began their work. "There are two options available to you," the first brother scoffed. "Please kneel down and take the money. Otherwise, we will break you in front of your grandfather." A crack appeared on Darius's knuckles. I picked door 3. It was a hard-fought battle. With their punches being pinpoint accurate and their smiles being cruel, the twins glided like shadows. On the other hand, Darius battled as if he had nothing left to lose, for the simple reason that he did not. His nose was broken by a spinning elbow, according to the first brother. First brother, he was left gasping for air on the asphalt after being hit by a devastating body slam. The sneer that Cray had disappeared. At the same time that he reached under his jacket, he muttered, "You should have stayed away. Kovac, splash." A shot rang out, although Cray was not the one who fired the weapon. When Lena reached the end of the alley, she was standing there with her hands trembling around a burning revolver. "No longer am I a child," she said in a low voice. Cray's face contorted in anger as he clenched his shoulder, which was bleeding terribly. "This isn't over." The voice of Darius was a snarl as he took a step forward. "That's right." So it is. Cray was thrown into his own automobile by him with a last blow that was so powerful that it shook the ground. Unconscious, the criminal lord sat down in a slouch. Upon the arrival of daylight, Darius and Lena were positioned outside the police station, where they saw Cray and his men being taken away in handcuffs. A taste of Mr. Henderson's coffee was taken. "You know they'll come for revenge," Darius gave a sneer. "Let them, mainly due to the fact that the Iron Bear was no longer only a fighter. He served as a cautionary tale. In the moments leading up to the storm, the city had a habit of holding its breath. This was something that Darius Kovac understood better than anybody else, even though it had been 3 days since Victor Cray had been arrested. The streets were still noticeably quiet. There will be no retribution. In the underworld, there are no whispers. Simply quiet, the type that precedes the sound of a knife being stabbed in the dark. After adjusting the straps of her bulletproof vest, Lena tightened them. "Are you sure they are going to show up?" He did not respond to Darius. His custom, 45s, which he had vowed he would never use again after leaving the combat pits, were too busy loading for him to pay attention to anything else. Mr. Henderson placed a cup of tea that was at a scalding temperature between them. "Cray's guys are not going to fight fairly. They are going to strike where it hurts." A rap on the door is heard. This is not a fist. No kick at all. There are 3 courteous raps. A cry sprang from Darius's instincts. Lena made a move to get her firearm, but Darius stopped her with a casual glance. He pressed himself against the wall that was next to the door, moving as if he were a ghost. "Who exactly is it?" "For Mr. Kovac, this is a delivery." The tone was low and soothing. "A trained expert." Before he could open the door, Darius froze solid. On the guest's welcome mat, there was a single gift. There is no courier. In the darkness, there was no trace of footprints. "Do you have the box?" A single card, the King of Hearts, the card in question, bloody and smeared down. Lena's chest tightened up as she breathed. "Yes, that is Cray's calling card," the speaker said. The jaw of Darius became clenched. "It is not. Now, this is not the same, mainly due to the fact that a message was written on the card in crooked letters. It's midnight. This is the docks. Come by yourself." Then she will die next, Darius's ex-girlfriend Maria, who was also the only woman he had ever loved, was captured on a Polaroid photograph that was attached. She was incarcerated. It is bleeding, and very much still moving. The air was heavy with salt and diesel, and the docks took on the appearance of a cemetery filled with rusty cargo containers and abandoned cranes. A fully armed Darius arrived at the scene. In addition to something worse, Kray's soldiers arrived. A dozen people emerged from the darkness, their disguises consisting of black ski masks that concealed their features. Standing in the heart of them was the surgeon, Kray's most dreaded enforcer, a man who lived up to his reputation in every sense of the word. The surgeon said, "Kovac," as he twisted a scalpel between his fingers throughout the procedure. "For a while, we were beginning to believe that you had lost your nerve." None of Darius' eyes blinked. "Maria, where are you?" A chuckle is heard. Next, the sound of a gunshot. During the moment when one of Kray's men pulled Maria forward while pressing a gun to her temple, Maria let out a scream. "Iron Bear, you should have avoided becoming involved in this situation," the surgeon told him now. "Get down on your knees," Darius let out a sigh. After that, he flashed a grin. It was not a battle that took place after that. There was a slaughter here. The movements of Darius were like those of a natural force. His elbows destroyed mouths. His knees caved in with his ribs. And every gunfire hit its target. On the other hand, Kray's troops were not the true danger. Surgeon surged forward, his scalpel gleaming in the air. Although Darius was able to avoid the sword, he felt it brush across his neck far too near. Maria was able to break away and retrieve a revolver that had fallen on the ground. As he fell, the surgeon clutched his stomach tightly. There is no sound. The clapping is slow. Despite the fact that his arm was still bandaged from Lena's gunfire, Victor Kray eventually made his way into the light. "Bravo," he curtly said. "However, you have overlooked one point." I heard a click behind them. When Darius looked around, he saw Mr. Henderson shoved against the muzzle of a shotgun. He did so just in time. Kray wore a smile. In a checkmate, the shotgun's barrel continued to push down on Mr. Henderson's back as it continued to press. The elderly guy did not bat an eye. During his lifetime, he had experienced more difficult things, such as wars, loss, and the gradual deterioration of a city that he had once cherished. But what about this? Now, this was not the same. His muscles were coiled up like springs, and blood was streaming from his split lip as he remained there frozen completely. If he made even one mistake, his mentor would be gone forever. While smoking a cigar with great slowness, Victor Kray let out a satisfying giggle. "As you can see, Kovac, this is the reason why you got rid of the subterranean." Way too much emotion. He emitted a cloud of smoke. "But what about tonight? You will find out tonight what happens when kindness is no longer present." There was Lena hiding in the darkness, and she was making her way out there. The only thing that Darius could do was pray that she had received his last message, which was the one that he had tucked away in the barrel of his rifle before throwing it into the bay. A very small lowering of his hands was made by Darius. "You want me?" It was a gravelly and blazingly hot voice. "Then you should take me." Allow the elderly guy to amble. As Kray tapped ash into the pier, he suggested that he was thinking about it. "It's tempting." "But not at all," he indicated the shooter with a nod. "Do it." The shotgun made a clicking sound. One of Mr. Henderson's moves. It was with a quickness that belied his age that the retired educator pivoted, thrusting his cane upward like a spear, and then he slammed it directly into the neck of the shooting suspect. During the moment when the thug was collapsing and choking, the shotgun boomed and discharged harmlessly into the night sky. The sneer that Kray had disappeared. Darius had already begun to make rapid progress. The fire is raging. What transpired after that was not a fight. The event was a funeral. As if they were wheat before the scythe, Kray's surviving soldiers were destroyed. Bones were broken. Arms were unloaded. Despite the fact that he was still bleeding from Maria's gunfire, The surgeon attempted to crawl away, but Lena suddenly appeared with her boot, crushing down on his wrist. Herschel said, "Are you going somewhere?" Nevertheless, Darius was solely interested in Cray. As his bravado began to crumble, the criminal lord reversed his course and moved near the edge of the pier. "If you kill me, Kovac, then my empire will become the problem of someone else," he said. "The conflict never comes to an end." He did not come to a halt. "Then I'll burn it all down." Cray's heel landed in the blank air. His eyes had a fleeting appearance of terror for the very first time. Just one push. There was a splash. The chilly water completely engulfed Cray in its maw. Round bare ashes are shown here. There was a dreary and silent dawn. As the police flooded the docks, they retrieved dead from the sea and placed those who survived in handcuffs. Maria was not afraid. Lena had several wounds, but she was still alive. Is it Mr. Henderson, then? While he was there, he was seeing the dawn from the edge of the pier. He mumbled, "It feels like it's coming to an end." Darius cleaned the blood that was on his face. Or a beginning, due to the fact that the city contained life. It continued to bleed. In addition, new creatures would emerge from the ruins of Cray's dominion at some point in the future. However, he would do the same thing. Is this the end?